I never liked hiking. Not really. I liked the idea of it, the crisp air, the birdsong, the freedom, but when it came to the real thing, I always ended up at the back of the group, panting, my calves aching, my thoughts trailing off into places I didn't want to go. That day was no different. We'd been on the trail for almost 2 hours, weaving through the dense pine forest behind Camp Cedarwind. I watched the others march ahead, their backpacks bouncing with each step, their voices fading in and out like echoes in a tunnel. Michelle, our camp counselor, kept glancing back at me with a forced smile. "You good, Leah?" she'd asked twice already. I'd nodded both times. "Yeah. Just pacing myself." What I didn't say was that my chest was already tight, not from the climb, but from something else. That old, familiar feeling that crept in when I was around too many people, too many forced smiles and surface-level conversations. It was easier to stay quiet. To walk a little slower. To disappear just enough that no one really noticed. The forest was thick with scent, damp earth, pine needles, and sun-warmed bark. Every so often, a beam of sunlight broke through the branches and lit the path ahead like a spotlight, guiding us deeper into the trees. The trail itself was narrow, sometimes barely more than a foot wide, with roots like bones jutting out of the ground. I walked in silence, counting my steps, until a flicker of movement caught the corner of my eye. A deer. It stood about 20 feet away, almost glowing in the dappled sunlight, with its white speckled coat and large, still eyes. It didn't run. It didn't even flinch. It just stared at me. I stopped. So did time. For a moment, it felt like we were the only two beings in the world. Me and this creature, wild, free, unafraid. Something in its gaze felt familiar. Not in a way I could explain, but in a way I couldn't ignore. I stepped off the trail. Just a little. Just to see it better. My boots crunched softly on the forest floor as I moved closer. Then the deer turned and vanished behind a cluster of trees. I hesitated. "Leah." Michelle's voice echoed faintly through the woods. "I'm coming." I called back, glancing toward the trail. But the deer had already gone, and curiosity tugged at me like a thread. I took another step forward, then another. The forest closed around me like a breath held tight. I moved through ferns and low branches, trying to spot that flicker of light again. But it was gone. And when I turned back, the trail wasn't there. Panic didn't come all at once. It slid in slow, like water rising in a dark room. I spun around in circles, searching for a glimpse of the path, for a familiar tree or rock, but everything looked the same, tall, straight trunks stretching up to a sky I couldn't see, floor thick with pine needles, air still and heavy. "Michelle?" I called. "Guys?" Only the wind answered, brushing through the leaves with a faint hiss. I retraced my steps, or tried to. Every direction I turned seemed wrong. The landmarks I thought I remembered were missing. It was like the forest had shifted behind me, sealing the trail like a wound that had never existed. "Don't panic," I told myself. "You're not far. You just turned around too many times." I pulled my whistle from the front pocket of my backpack and blew it, 3 sharp bursts. The sound cut through the silence like glass shattering. I waited. Nothing. I blew it again. Still nothing. My breath hitched, but I forced it down. This was just like every other time in my life when someone told me, "Stay where you are, and we'll come back for you." And they didn't. I was used to this. Not being lost in the woods, but the feeling. That hollow, echoing sense of being left behind. My mom used to say I had an old soul. I think she meant I always seemed too quiet for my age. I didn't cry when Dad left. Didn't fight when she started working late and coming home even later. I just adapted. Learned to survive on my own. That wasn't bravery. That was habit. And here I was, alone again. Somewhere in the middle of a forest that suddenly felt too alive. Too quiet. I looked around and picked a direction, any direction, and walked. Every sound felt exaggerated now, the snap of twigs under my feet, the distant cry of a bird, the creak of tree limbs shifting above. At first, I told myself I was imagining the whispers, the soft murmurs that came and went like waves. But the longer I walked, the clearer they became. Not words. Not exactly. But something. My heart pounded harder. I stopped and turned, shining my flashlight into the trees. Nothing. Just trunks and shadows. The sun was dipping low now, casting the forest in thick orange light. I found a small clearing and sat down, trying to think. I had water. A granola bar. My flashlight. A folded emergency blanket. I'd listened during the safety lectures. I knew the rules. Stay in one place. Signal for help. Wait. But no one ever told me what to do when the forest started whispering your name. That's what it sounded like, just before night fell completely. My name. Leah. I stood up so fast I nearly tripped. Who's there? My voice cracked. Nothing. Not a whisper. Not a breath of wind. I pressed my back against a tree and scanned the clearing. My fingers trembled as I gripped the flashlight, beam darting through the branches. My breath was too loud. My pulse pounded in my ears. Was it an animal? A camper playing a prank? My brain tried to come up with something logical. Something that made sense. But nothing made sense anymore. And as the darkness swallowed the last of the daylight, the forest felt like it was closing in, breathing around me. Alive. Watching. Waiting. Darkness in the forest wasn't like the kind in my room at home. It wasn't something you could adjust to or soften with a nightlight. It was a thick, all-consuming black that swallowed everything whole, even sound. The flashlight was the only thing standing between me and that endless dark, its beam weak and flickering, barely reaching past a few feet. I sat huddled in the middle of the small clearing, wrapped in the emergency blanket like it was armor. My knees were pulled to my chest, and I kept turning the flashlight toward every noise, every shifting shadow. But the whispers kept coming. Not constant, just enough to make my skin crawl. Sometimes they sounded like wind. Sometimes they sounded like words. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks. That fear was making me imagine things. But that didn't explain the footsteps. They started just after the stars blinked into view. Soft. Measured. Crunching slowly through the leaves and pine needles, circling the clearing like a predator. I held my breath, trying not to move, not to blink. The sound would fade, then start again from the other side. Always just beyond the reach of my light. I whispered to myself, it's an animal. Just a deer. Maybe a raccoon. But deep down, I knew. It wasn't. Suddenly, a branch snapped, loud and sharp, like a gunshot in the stillness. I jerked the flashlight toward the sound and saw nothing. No eyes. No creature. Just trees. And yet, the footsteps continued. Slow. Deliberate. I stood up, heart hammering, every muscle in my body screaming to run, but where? I didn't even know which way was back. I turned in circles, trying to decide, then heard something new. Breathing. Not mine. A low exhale, ragged and close. Too close. I spun the flashlight and for a fraction of a second, just a blink, I saw a shadow duck behind a tree. It was tall. Thin. Human-shaped. I ran. I don't know where I found the strength, but my legs moved on their own, crashing through the underbrush. Branches scraped my arms and snagged my backpack. I didn't care. I just needed to get away. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Every instinct screamed at me to go forward, to keep moving until my lungs gave out. I don't know how long I ran. Minutes? Hours? Eventually, I collapsed near a rocky slope, my body trembling, chest heaving. The flashlight was gone, I must have dropped it. I still had my whistle, but I didn't dare blow it. If someone, or something, was out there, I didn't want to tell them where I was. I tucked myself under a hollow near the rocks, curling up in the dark. I closed my eyes, trying to pretend I was home. In my room. Safe. But sleep didn't come. Only memories. Of the night my dad left. The last thing he said to me was, "Be strong, Leah. You'll be okay." But he didn't wait to see if I would be. Of the mornings when Mom forgot I existed until she needed something. The quiet dinners. The empty hugs. The silence that filled every corner of our house like smoke. And now this forest, the quiet here wasn't empty. It was alive. Heavy. Pressing down on me like a weight I couldn't see. Just before dawn, I heard something again. Not whispers this time. A voice. Soft. Female. Calling my name. Leah. It wasn't Michelle. It wasn't anyone I recognized. Still, I peeked from the rocks and looked toward the trees. There, in the early morning light, stood a girl. She looked my age. Pale skin, dark hair, wearing a faded yellow jacket that looked like it belonged to another time. She didn't move. Just stared at me. I blinked. She was gone. The birds began to sing again, as if nothing had happened. As if the night hadn't been a nightmare wrapped in shadows and whispers. But I knew better now. I wasn't just lost. I was being watched. And whatever was in this forest, it knew my name. The sun rose like it was trying to pretend the night never happened. Its golden light filtered through the trees, catching on dewdrops and painting everything in a warm, gentle hue. But the warmth didn't reach my bones. I sat beneath the rocky outcrop, arms wrapped tight around my knees, listening to the forest come back to life. Birds chirped overhead. A squirrel darted up a tree. Normal sounds. Comforting sounds. But none of them erased what I'd seen. The girl in the yellow jacket. I didn't know how to explain her, not to myself, not to anyone. She hadn't looked like a hallucination. She'd looked real. Solid. But one blink, and she was gone. Maybe I imagined her, I thought. Maybe I was too tired, too scared. But deep inside, I didn't believe that. After sipping some water and forcing down a granola bar, I packed my things and stood. My legs were sore from running, my back stiff from sleeping on the ground. But I had to move. I couldn't stay in one place. Not after what happened last night. I decided to follow the slope downward, figuring that heading downhill might lead to a stream, or road, or at least some kind of marker. As I walked, I tried not to listen too closely. The forest was quieter than it should have been. Like it was watching me again. About an hour passed, maybe more, before I saw something strange up ahead. Color. Bright, unnatural yellow. My heart jumped. I ran the last few feet and stumbled into another small clearing. There, half buried under leaves and moss, was a yellow jacket. Faded from the sun, torn at the sleeve, but unmistakably familiar. It was her jacket. The girl from last night. I dropped to my knees and brushed away the debris. Beneath the jacket, I found a small, rusted tin box. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside were a few scattered papers, drawings, mostly. Crayon sketches of trees, stars, faces. One drawing showed a girl standing beneath a crooked pine tree with a large black shape behind her. I stared at it, chilled. The black shape had no face. I looked around the clearing, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Was this where she had gone missing? Had someone left this behind years ago? A shiver ran through me. I felt like I was standing in someone else's memory. Someone who had never made it out. Then I saw the carving. On the tree closest to the jacket, just above eye level, were initials, L.M. And below them, a word etched deep into the bark. Run. The letters were old, covered in lichen, but still readable. My mouth went dry. I stepped back, heart racing. This was no coincidence. The girl had been trying to warn me. Suddenly, the air shifted, like the forest had taken a breath. I turned slowly, scanning the trees. And then I saw it again. Movement. Something tall, just behind the tree line. It didn't step out. It didn't speak. But I felt it watching. A presence, heavy and cold, prickling every hair on my neck. I didn't wait. I ran again, this time more carefully, keeping the sun to my left, using landmarks to avoid walking in circles. My breaths came sharp and fast, my legs screaming, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. Eventually, I found the stream. It wound through the forest like a silver ribbon. Relief poured through me, I could follow it. It might lead to a lake, a cabin, maybe even a road. I bent down to splash water on my face. That's when I saw a reflection. The girl in the yellow jacket, standing behind me on the other side of the stream. I whipped around. Nothing. The space where she'd stood was empty, only trees and sunlight. But this time, she had looked different. She had been crying. The girl's reflection haunted my thoughts long after it vanished. Why had she appeared again? And why did she look so heartbroken this time, like she was begging me to understand something? The memory of her teary eyes clung to me as I walked, trailing the stream through the forest. The water gurgled beside me, a soothing rhythm in contrast to the wild beating of my heart. But I couldn't shake the feeling that each step was pulling me deeper into something I didn't understand. Why me? I wondered. Why now? It wasn't just about getting lost anymore. Something was drawing me in. The jacket. The drawings. The carvings. The reflection. Each piece whispered of a story left unfinished, of someone forgotten. The stream curved sharply and led me into a shadowed grove where the trees grew closer together. It was quieter here, no birds, no breeze, just the sound of my boots in the dirt and the trickle of water beside me. Then I saw it. A structure. Hidden between the trees was a weather-worn cabin, sun-bleached and overgrown. Ivy crawled up its wooden walls, and the front door hung crooked on one hinge. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. I hesitated at the edge of the clearing, heart pounding. Something in me screamed to run. But something else, a voice softer, steadier, told me this place held answers. I stepped closer. The door creaked open when I touched it, revealing a single room. Dust floated in the sunlight, and the air smelled like damp wood and thyme. A broken chair lay tipped over by the wall. A child's backpack, pink, torn, and faded, rested in the corner. I approached slowly and knelt beside it. The name tag was still attached. Lily Moore. The initials on the tree. L.M. A lump rose in my throat. I knew that name. I'd heard it once, in a story whispered at camp, about a girl who'd gone missing years ago. She'd wandered off during a hike. They searched for days, but she was never found. No one ever said her name out loud anymore. Just that girl. Just the warning to stay on the trail. But I was holding her story in my hands. Suddenly, the floor creaked behind me. I spun around. Nothing. Only the empty room and shifting shadows. I backed away, heart thudding. Then a soft sound drifted through the cabin, faint, melodic. Humming. A child's voice. Light and haunting. I turned toward the sound and saw her, standing in the doorway, her yellow jacket glowing in the dim light. Lily. Her face was pale, eyes wide, mouth trembling. She didn't move, didn't speak. Just stood there like she had all night, watching me. I whispered, Are you trying to tell me something? She nodded. Then slowly raised her hand, and pointed behind me. I turned, pulse quickening. There was a hatch in the floor. Almost invisible under the dust and shadows. I stepped forward and lifted it. It creaked open with a groan, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. Cold air rushed up from below, thick with the scent of earth and old secrets. I looked back, but Lily was gone again. Alone, I stared into the dark below. I didn't want to go down there. But something told me I had to. She needed me to. And maybe, just maybe, finding her truth would help me find my way home. The hatch groaned louder as I pulled it open, releasing a heavy breath of cold air from the darkness below. It smelled like wet stone and rot, like something left alone for too long. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it echo in my ears, but I couldn't close the hatch now. Not after everything. Not after seeing Lily again. She wanted me to find this. I aimed the beam of my flashlight into the hole. Wooden steps, narrow and old, disappeared into pitch black. Each one looked like it would crumble if I wasn't careful. The cabin above felt strangely quiet now, as if it were holding its breath along with me. I gripped the edge of the opening and slowly descended. The wooden steps groaned under my weight. 1, 2, 10. I lost count after that. The air grew colder with each step, and soon the light from the open hatch faded to nothing. I was inside the forest's stomach now, swallowed whole. The staircase ended in a small underground room. The flashlight swept across stone walls lined with shelves, each one cluttered with jars filled with murky liquids and things I couldn't identify. Bones. Feathers. Strings of hair. Strange symbols etched into the rock. This wasn't just a cellar. It was a shrine. I stepped carefully into the center, the floor crunching softly under my boots. In the far corner sat an old wooden box, almost like a toy chest, its lid half open. My fingers shook as I reached it and slowly lifted the rest of the lid. Inside were items I didn't expect, childish things. A hairbrush. A sock puppet. A photograph of a girl in a yellow jacket, smiling with a missing front tooth. Lily. I touched the edge of the photo, and a sudden wave of emotion washed over me. Sorrow. Not mine, someone else's. Someone who had missed her. Someone who had tried to remember. It pressed against my chest like weight I couldn't explain. Then I heard the whisper again. Only this time, it came from behind me. I turned fast, flashlight swinging wide. At first, I saw nothing. But then, slowly, the shadows began to move. Something was there. Not Lily. Something, older. It stepped forward, not walking but gliding, its shape barely human, tall and thin, cloaked in a darkness that seemed to breathe. I couldn't see its face. It didn't have one. Just a shifting void where its eyes and mouth should be. But I felt it watching me. I stumbled backward, breath catching in my throat. The flashlight flickered wildly in my shaking hands. What do you want? I whispered. It didn't answer with words. But something moved through my head, thoughts that weren't mine. Images. Flashes. Lily lost in the woods, crying. Sitting by a tree. Hearing whispers. Then her running, always running. Until she found this place. She hadn't meant to come here. But it had found her. It fed on fear. Loneliness. The feeling of being forgotten. And I realized, this thing hadn't just taken Lily. It had become her fear. And now, it wanted mine. No, I said, backing toward the stairs. I'm not like her. I won't. But the thing moved closer, and I tripped, hitting the wall hard. The room shifted. The flashlight dropped from my hands and rolled away, plunging everything into near darkness. Leah. The voice wasn't the thing's. It was Lily's. But it didn't come from the shadow. It came from the photo in my pocket, the one I'd tucked away without thinking. I pulled it out, holding it like a shield. The light from the flashlight still flickered faintly on the floor, enough to see the girl smile. You're not alone, the voice whispered. And for the first time in what felt like days, I believed it. Not just because of her, but because of me. Because even though fear had followed me all my life, through my parents' silence, through my own quiet hurt, I was still here. Still standing. Still fighting. I'm not afraid of you, I said aloud. The shadow paused. You can't feed on what's already healed. The air trembled. The shape let out a sound, like wind through broken glass, and began to flicker, like it was unraveling. Pieces of shadow peeled away, drifting like smoke. The room grew brighter. Warmer. Then, in a final twist of light and darkness, it was gone. I sank to the floor, shaking. For a long moment, I just sat there, letting the silence hold me. Then, from the stairs, a soft sound. Footsteps. I looked up. Lily stood at the top of the stairs, her figure glowing faintly in the dawn light filtering through the hatch. But this time, she smiled. Not the toothy grin from the photo. Something softer. Peaceful. She raised her hand in a wave, then turned, and vanished into light. I climbed the stairs slowly, feeling lighter with every step. When I emerged into the forest, the sun had risen fully. The air felt fresh. Clean. The cabin was still there, but it no longer looked haunted. Just abandoned. And behind me, the whispers had finally stopped. When I stepped out of the cabin for the last time, the forest felt different. The shadows still stretched long between the trees, and the wind still rustled the leaves, but the fear was gone. The silence didn't feel threatening anymore. It felt calm. As if the woods had exhaled a breath they'd been holding for years. I stood there for a long while, letting the sunlight wash over me, warming my face and drying the cold sweat on my skin. I looked back at the cabin, at the worn wooden door and the ivy curling up its sides. It didn't seem haunted anymore. It just looked old. Quiet. Forgotten, but no longer angry. And then, for the first time since I got lost, I felt a pull, not from fear, not from panic, but from something gentle and steady. Hope. I reached into my pocket and pulled out Lily's photo. It was slightly bent from the fall, the corners soft, but her face was still clear. Her smile. Her missing front tooth. Her eyes that looked so much like mine. "Thank you," I whispered, and tucked the photo into the side pocket of my backpack. I didn't know where the trail was, not exactly. But I didn't need to. The stream was still nearby, winding like a silver ribbon through the trees. I started walking beside it again, my steps slower this time, more thoughtful. With each mile, the forest thinned. The trees stood farther apart. The light grew brighter. I passed the clearing where I'd first seen the deer. Where I'd first stepped off the trail. And I stopped. The deer was there again, standing still between two trees, watching me. I held its gaze. It blinked once, then turned and walked into the forest, slow and calm. Not luring me this time. Just saying goodbye. I walked on. Sometime around midday, I began to hear sounds that didn't belong to the wilderness, distant voices, shouting, a dog barking. I broke into a run, pushing through a cluster of bushes, and stumbled out into a gravel path. "Leah?" The voice cut through the air like a lightning strike. "Michelle." She stood at the edge of the trail with two other counselors and a rescue dog. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, tears already forming. "Oh my, Leah." I barely had time to take a breath before she rushed forward and wrapped her arms around me. For the first time in days, I let someone hold me. I didn't pull away. "We've been searching all night," she said, her voice breaking. "We thought we lost you." "I thought." "I found her," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "Lily Moore." Michelle pulled back just enough to look me in the eyes. Her expression shifted, first confusion, then something deeper. "What did you say?" "I found where she went missing." "I saw her," I said. "She's gone now." But she wanted me to find her. She needed someone to remember. Michelle didn't ask questions. Not right away. She just pulled me close again, and the others called in over the radios. More voices. More footsteps. The camp had been turned upside down searching for me. Counselors, search and rescue, even some of the older campers. They had maps spread out. Whistles. Dogs. But somehow, none of them had found what I had. Back at camp, they wrapped me in blankets and handed me hot soup. They offered me clean clothes, a shower, a bed. I accepted all of it, but I didn't sleep. Not yet. Because that night, I asked Michelle if I could show her the photo. When she saw it, her hand trembled. "That's her," she whispered. "That's Lily. I was here that summer. I was 13. We were in the same group." She wandered off, and no one ever saw her again. I looked up at her, heart tight. She tried to come back. Michelle nodded slowly. I think she just needed someone to listen. That night, as the other campers slept in the forest whispered only with the breeze, I sat alone on the porch of the cabin and looked up at the stars. I thought about fear. About being forgotten. About the ache of waiting for someone who doesn't come back. And then I thought about Lily. And about myself. For so long, I'd believed I was just a girl people forgot. That I didn't matter. That disappearing was safer than trying to be seen. But I wasn't invisible. Not anymore. In the days that followed, I helped the counselors mark the path that had been lost. We found the stream. The overgrown cabin. The tree with the initials. We didn't go back inside. But we left a sign there. A wooden marker, carved by hand. In memory of Lily Moore. Never forgotten. Some people whispered that I'd imagine it all. That fear and loneliness had tricked my mind into seeing things. But I knew the truth. So did Michelle. And when I left camp 2 weeks later, I wasn't the same girl who had arrived. I walked taller. Spoke louder. I called my mom for the first time in weeks and told her how I really felt, not to blame her, but to let her in. I even wrote a letter to my dad. I didn't know if he'd answer. But for the first time, I didn't need him to. I had my own story now. And it wasn't about being abandoned. It was about surviving. It was about listening, to the quiet, to the ghosts, to myself. And knowing that even in the darkest woods, where no one else can see you, you are still there. Still alive. Still worthy of being found.